Good morning. I'm going to talk to you about BankID, but before I do that, I would like to give a lot of you apologies because I don't understand and have the background and understanding of the tradition in Asia, bringing along business cards, which I haven't brought at all. And I understand that now that's very common to do. So my apologies, but at the end of my presentation, my contact details, and feel free to send me an email or phone me, send me a text message. So, this young man happened to be me, 30 years ago, almost, on my first trip to Thailand, after being in India. And it was such a pleasure to get here, and apologies to India. But 3 weeks backpacking in India was tiresome, and coming to Thailand was really having a vacation. What have happened in 30 years? On the right side, yesterday. On the left side, 30 years ago. It's become more sunny, and it's a lot more people in Bangkok as well. To the topic of the day. In the last couple of decades, we have become more and more dependent upon computers. More complex, more network-dependent computers. And what we have lagged behind in that is the electronic identity. It's becoming, in order to realize or utilize what we have in the network, iCloud, we need to know who is in the other end of the network. Most of the time we need to know that, but not all of the time, and it's important to segregate those from each other. We see a lot of times people tend to use strong authentications, even though they doesn't need strong authentications. So we need to use strong authentication at the times where it's actually needed, not all the time. In order to make a PKI scheme work, you need to have systems where you actually can use the PKI certificates, which is what I've seen in most of Europe and a lot of the rest of the world, is that countries are developing PKI infrastructures, but they don't develop something to use it on. So you have a lot of certificates there, like you have a card, but nothing to use it on. So what's the point? It's a lot of cost and a lot of investment which is not utilized and giving anything back. It's kind of the typical chicken-egg problem. What is coming first? And I think that takes me to what we have worked on in BankID. The key word is cooperation, and that's really the big innovation we have done. We started off 10 years, 12 years ago with a system for the banks, and the banks were the aim for this. We developed a common agreement with the banks that we're going to take this PKI system out into live, and where we started was to put up an organization where Finance Norway, which is sort of the interest organization for all the banks, they hosted the root CA on the top, and then each of the banks had their own CA. We put up the rules for who could be a CA, who could be issuing certificates, which persons could have a certificate, and at what time. How often do you have to renew the certificate, and what's the procedure to actually identify the persons before they get their certificates? To have 130 banks talk to each other, develop this infrastructure together, was by far the most complex. It's always difficult to get competitors to sit in the same room and talk about infrastructure, how they're going to develop this. But I think what's really made them do this was to look up a little bit and realize that the infrastructure and the computers were not the key factors for the banks. The banks are good at investments, money, lending out money, and risk-based system. And when they realized that, they saw that, yes, let's do this. Let's have one common infrastructure and continue to develop that. After a while, we saw that the mobile became more and more important, and we started to talk with the Norwegian mobile operators, and we managed to get one of them, which had 50% of the market share, going along, and we developed this mobile PKI together with them. The reason for this was basically we saw that the customers became more and more dependent on the telephone, and we sort of needed to develop that as a part of this. And then we started to talk to the government, because we came to a point where we actually had most of the banking society were using our PKI infrastructure, but it was, most people thought of it as a way to log into your internet bank and nothing more. And then we got this being able to use it at payment on the internet. We were able to use it, but at other kind of financial sector areas. But it was basically understood as a bank infrastructure. When we got the government in talk, we were able to get them to, because they had no infrastructure at all, and instead of building their own national identity infrastructure, they developed a requirement list for the market. And they said, you need to be a qualified certificate in order to be used. And then they added some extra security requirements. And the market did apply those requirements, and they started to use it. And that's been really successful. Today, we see that the government is using, well, the Norwegian citizen is in contact with the government 10 times a year. That's up from probably 1.4, I think, in 3 years. So now we are in a situation where the citizen is happy because he's able to do whatever he wants to do. He doesn't have to go to the municipality or to the government. He can actually do it online. And I get back to some of the services we actually have. Before I go more into this, we have got to the most people, well, 80-something% of the population above 15 is using BankID on internet towards government, towards the banks, towards other private sector companies. And then we started a year ago to talk about, okay, what can we do further? And we developed this project or program, which is a series of small cross-sector digitalization projects. And its initial, it was between public sector and the banks, or the finance sector. It's, it has a huge estimated return on investment. It's $4 billion US in 10 years. And an example of this is if I want to loan money today, I need to go to the bank. I can fill out the form on the net. I can sign that form. I can even sign the documents afterwards. But in between there, I need to copy my taxation papers. I need to add them to the loan. The bank receives it. They need to key it into their system, and they have to verify it against the taxation authorities. What we are now doing is that I signed a consent to the bank that the bank are allowed to go to the taxation authority, get an electronic copy of my taxation papers, and then send it back. Then it's an all electronic process, saving a lot of work, and it's also saving time, because now I'm able to do this at the snap of a time. It's doing online loan process. That's an example of a system which the banks are in favor of because it helps them a lot. We also have an example where taxation authorities are today allowed to go to the bank and ask to have documents about a person or a company. Today that's all manual, and they actually have to go to the, it's actually, a lot of the documents are sent by fax to the taxation authorities, making it difficult. And now we are looking at the taxation authority sending a request signed to the bank. The bank finds the documentation through a robot and sending it automatically back to the taxation authorities. So something which the taxation authorities saves a lot of time and money on. And how have we gone about organizing this? Because it's a lot of different parties, and government is not one organization, it's a lot of organization. So what we have done is to have this organization where we have a top management up here. And top management is the key director in each of the organization, which is we have a project running with. Once you doesn't have a project running, you're not part of the top management group anymore. We have a program office. It's the head of the programs from each organization, and which is here. And then you have the project running under here. Currently, it's 7 projects, and they're running as separate projects all by themselves. It's people from public sector and private sector. And this is really, now we are making the data which we have in each different organization able to be joined at one point, and we are still able to take care of the privacy of the people because they actually have to give the consent all the time. So I think this is an example of what I'm trying to say is important, or the opposite of what I'm trying to say is important. as a user, I want to go to this point and I want to have one ATM. I just want to have to choose which ATM, or if I have several cards, I have to go to different ATMs in order to take out my money. So cooperation, and this wouldn't be necessary. A little bit more details of our history. The organization was established in 2000. We did evaluate whether we should go for a card-based solution. I mean, the banks had a history with cards. We soon realized that that's going to be costly. And it's also going to be costly in terms of user friendliness. People doesn't want to install software on their computers. And if they do so, they are getting into problems. They need support. Support is costly. So instead, we defined that we were going to have a a roaming solution. We defined it at that point in time. Later, the buzzword iCloud has come around. So basically, it's an iCloud, a cloud-based system, where the keys and the key store is based in an HSM in the network. It's X509, and it's qualified certificates. And then, as I told you, later on, we came up with the mobile PKI, which is becoming increasingly more popular. Those having a mobile PKI is using it almost 2 times more frequently than their cloud-based system. It's also qualified certificates, and it's based in the SIM card. So our business model is really, it's really a bit like Visa, MasterCard. It's a four-con model. As a private person, I need to have one agreement with one of the banks, and through that I'm able to access all internet banks, all private sector who has signed up an agreement with BankID. And so that's the merchant side, the relying party side. They also need only one agreement, and all BankID users can access that merchant. So it's a bit like Visa, MasterCard. As having a Visa card, you can go to any Visa shop and you can use a card. And that was basically the intention when we developed the scheme. And I do say for our 5-corner model, and the reason is the MNOs. In the beginning, the MNOs came in as the 5th corner because the merchant actually needed an agreement with the MNO. We have taken that away because it became too complex for the merchant. Nowadays, the merchant only needs one agreement with BankID, and that's it. It's a bit complex slide, but it's basically trying to sum up some of the agreements we have and the different stakeholders in our system. So in the center, and it's always interesting to put yourself in the center, so BankID, we manage and operate the common operational infrastructure on behalf of the banks. We develop the service and we sell the service through agents. And we ensure interoperability between the different parties. The banks, they host the RA, and they also own the CA, although the CA is in the common operational infrastructure. operated by BankID. They do the issuing both of the end user's certificate and of the merchant certificates. And then we have BITS, which I believe is an important part of being able to do this. BITS is holding the policy documents and making sure that we have common security standards, sort of ensuring that we have the glue between the banks being able to trust each other. They ensure that all the security standards are applied, doing audits of the various banks. And Finance Norway holding the root, being sort of the key above all the Norwegian banks. And of course, it's all run at NNI. They do the operation and support, and sort of is the company which we have outsourced our operations to. So this is the process. How do you go about to get your BankID certificate if you are a private person? Yes, you do. You go to your bank. You need to be physically at one bank. You need to take your passport with you. And the bank is then issuing a BankID certificate. And you will have an easier, safe digital journey afterwards. But it's the rules in the country is not to use the passport, but the banks wanted a higher degree of safety and agreed that passport is better to use than driving license or that kind of documentation. So 3.5 million users, and what are their experience? We're doing yearly questions, and one of the interesting things is that 97% of them feel safety by not having a one-click process. You have to go through several steps using BankID. You have to enter your social security number, you have to enter your one-time passcode and a password. And people feel that is kind of a safe thing because it's not too easy, although it's easy. Simplicity. People believe that through BankID they're able to do a lot of the stuff on the internet which they're not able to do before. So 94% feels that BankID is giving them an easier world. Privacy. Privacy is important, and as a minimum, we shall follow any national law, and currently we are with the certificate, the merchant gets basic information like my name and date of birth. We have other information stored, which we do give away to the merchant if they are allowed to have that information. The customer gives a consent signing up to use BankID. But I believe in the future we need to adjust this and have consent every time the customer is using BankID and the merchant is getting information. So what can we use this for? Of course, internet banks, which basically where it all started, and that was also where we doing the issuing process through the internet banks. Insurance, age verification, this is kind of amusing story. In Norway, we have a long winter, and we have a long period where we don't have any sun. And tanning studios is common. The thing is that we have a law saying that you're not allowed to use them before the age of 18. So we set up, this company set up a age control verification with a mobile BankID. And of course, we have signing of rental agreement, we have mobile payment. One of the, I think, best stories is if you're a student, you can get a student loan from the government. The students was introduced to sign this document, I think 3 years ago. And that loan, student banking organization was expecting to have like 50% of the students starting to use it the first year. And then there was 70% next year. But when they introduced it, it was like 80% the first year and 96% the second year. So basically everyone is using that. And I mean, it's no wonder. By signing electronically, the students get the money on their bank account the next day, able to spend it on beer and other fun. So this shows really the development. We have almost 3.6 million customers now. 1 million, we passed 1 million BankID on mobile a couple of days ago. And they are almost 40% of the transactions done by the mobile. We are aiming for 500 million transactions this year, and still growing. I think we actually have passed 500 million this year. And adoption, how was it achieved? As I said, the banks did the issuing, but it's not only about issuing, it's about actually using it themselves. So take your own medicine, introduced it on online banking. All the banks did this. So it's a combination of issuing and technology and do your own medicine. So as I said earlier, the Norwegian government introduced requirements in order to be used at the government portal. They introduced also some changes in the laws. So in the KYC AML law, they introduced a change to, if you wanted to do an KYC AML of a customer electronically, you needed to be at the highest security level of that identity. Otherwise, it wasn't allowed. So BankID had to sort of get on that level in order to get new customers for the bank. But still, 90% of the usage is still in the financial industry. We are aiming to have this part, others, meaning the rest of the private sector. The aim is to have that 50% on that. But at the moment, the fastest growing is public sector. They've gone from 0 to 5.1% in a couple of years. And they're really introducing a lot of interesting services to the citizen. So the government, what can it be used for? It's more than 700 services where you can use BankID. It's it's all introduced through one point, which is called the ID port. And through that you can access the 700 services. They're doing more than 1 million transactions. I think this is a fairly old number. But the thing is that you have, the government is really satisfied because they see that less people is going to the public sector offices, more people is doing electronic, and more people is actually happy and satisfied with the government. There's more details on what you can use it for, and as Finland described, we have also e-prescriptions, which is popular. We also got e-vaccinations, so all the vaccinations I've done, all the vaccinations my children have done, we can go in and have a look at it and keep track of what's happening, which is a type of service which citizen is happy for. And of course, which is not here, but tax declaration is popular, and the day, and I'll show you the figures later on, but the day where the tax data is published and you can log in and look at it, it's really hyping. And so where can you use it in the banking? It's being used for credit card services. It's really up to the bank, but I think 99% of Norwegian banks is using BankID to secure Visa, MasterCard transactions. One of the results is that they have far less losses than the rest of the world. It's still up to the merchant if they want to use 3D Secure, but we had the local bus transportation in Oslo, which did not use BankID or 3D Secure, and they had so much losses, so they introduced BankID on mobile and reduced the losses from 100,000 euro a month to 0. So an example, it's mostly used, well, the most common thing to use BankID in the financial sector is logging into the online internet bank, but also for validation or signing of the transactions. All or most of the banks actually, if I'm entering a transaction for payment abroad, or even to another bank, I have to sign that transaction afterwards. And of course, signing of mortgage documents. One of the banks estimated that they would save 400 euros for each loan document where they could sign it electronically. So a huge saving for the banks. And other areas we can use it, logging into the universities, getting a place to live when you're studying. So what's the lessons learned? Cooperation is, I think, the most important. Nothing of this would have been possible if we hadn't gotten the bank to cooperate. I think that's the key factor. The government starting to use our system was also important, because it was a window and a way of telling the people that this is not only for banking, it's something you can use at more places. And this, when the system was introduced, we started off by using Java. And Java was a hassle. And it was a big pain for a long time till we was able to get rid of it in 2012. And the customers really was satisfied with that. So some figures for BankID on mobile. So a bit old, as I said, we are past 1 million users now. We close to 15 transactions per month per user. And it's 300 plus merchants where you can actually use your identity. This is the peak where the taxation data is getting available, and you can log in on the government portal to look at your data to see if you actually get money back or if you have to pay more money. I think the key point here is mobile. I can't stress that enough. Our customer is getting more and more mobile. They want to use the mobile at everything, especially the young people. And we are working hard to make our system even more mobile than it is at the moment. So, important. And I think difficult to see this, but the banks believe that the enrollment process today is too difficult. It takes too much time. The banks really doesn't want people to get into their offices. That's costly. So we are looking at how can we do this otherwise. And one of them we are exploring is to use the phone, the mobile phone, read off the RFID chip on the passport, do a selfie and a face recognition, and try to enroll the customers through that system. Should be possible to make it work. Not on iPhone yet though. But we need to do something because the banks are complaining about having to enroll the customers. How am I on time? Five minutes, okay. So this is a little bit about BankID as an organization. We started off doing being an organization which only had responsibility for the operational part of BankID, making sure that everything was working, development of new functionalities. And then we moved 2 years ago to a situation where BankID is actually the selling part of the system also. But we are still a small organization. We're still only 12 people. And we are trying to do this through a partner model. So we have a lot of different partners. And these are the companies which are our partners or dealers. They are sort of integrational companies. Some of them is working throughout Europe, some is only in Norway, and some is in the Nordic countries. They are important to us to go out and sell and tell about our product. PKI is technical and it's difficult to understand for a lot of companies. So it's important for us to have the help of these companies. Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nils Brurberg. Thanks for joining us here in Bangkok. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our next session is a very